in science, delivering better health outcomes, but also just confirming that Melbourne really is the centre of science, the centre of advanced manufacturing, the centre of innovation in our nation, and beyond that in our region. So this is just a fantastic day. 1,000 jobs, 500 in construction. This is a pretty big facility, 1.5 MCGs, and just confirms our place in scientific discovery and the translation of that wisdom and knowledge into products and jobs. Sovereign capability is so important. For the last 2.5 years, everybody around the world has wanted the same things at the same time. And because we didn't make enough things here, that's made a challenging time even more difficult. With today's partnership, today's announcement, we can look with a sense of confidence, not just for the products we know will come from this partnership, but all the possibilities in so many other parts of respiratory medicine, as well as cancer. All manner of other patients are set to benefit from this. It's a fantastic day, and again I thank the Prime Minister for his partnership, not just in this but in so many other areas. It's so good to be able to welcome the Prime Minister here leading a government that is about doing things, getting things done, working with the states and particularly working with Victoria to provide that national leadership, and of course to have Moderna here as well. Fantastic outcome. I'll now throw over to the Prime Minister to add to my comments, and I think we're happy to take any questions you have.
Well, thanks very much, Premier. It is indeed a great day to be here with the Victorian Government and with Moderna, celebrating what is an extraordinary achievement to actually be having a manufacturing facility like this, taking science and innovation, making sure that it's commercialised, helping to build our national sovereignty and national security. Australia has always been very good at science, and we've been good at innovation. What we haven't always been good at is commercialising the opportunities that come from that. And one of the lessons of the pandemic is that we need to be more resilient, that we need to be more self-reliant, and we need to make more things here. I said during the campaign that I wanted a future made in Australia. This is a practical example of exactly what the new government is talking about. This is an example of the sort of activity that we'll see replicated through our National Reconstruction Fund that we will introduce legislation on before the end of this year. This is precisely what we need to do, creating high-value jobs, creating a big bonus for Australia. And here in Victoria, Monash, I congratulate Monash University as well on the leadership that they're showing in this area. Happy to take questions.
Prime Minister, have you asked the Solicitor General to look at reports that Scott Morrison took an additional portfolio as the captain?
Well, this is extraordinary and unprecedented. And I've asked when I returned back to Canberra, I flew down from Canberra this morning. When I return this afternoon, I'll be having briefings with the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet who are seeking advice on this. Let's be very clear. Australians knew during the election campaign that I was running a shadow ministry. What they didn't know was that Scott Morrison was running a shadow government that was operating in the shadows. What we have when we get sworn in as ministers is that there's some transparency there. A whole lot of questions arise from this. What did Peter Dutton and other continuing members of the now shadow ministry know about these circumstances? How is it that the Australian people can be misled, whereby we know now that Scott Morrison was not only being Prime Minister, but was Minister for Health, was Minister for Industry and Science at the same time as Resources, was the Minister for Finance. And we have the extraordinary revelation that Matthias Cormann apparently wasn't aware that Scott Morrison was the Minister for Finance as well as himself. We all know that Scott Morrison had trouble doing the job that he had. Perhaps it was because he was doing so many different jobs that we didn't know that he had. In Australia, we have a Westminster system of government that produces accountability. This is a sort of tin pot activity that we would ridicule if it was in a non-democratic country. Here in Parliament, I, as leader of my party and the Peter Dutton now, but Scott Morrison as the former leader of the country, would table the list of ministers. That is not some academic exercise. That is so that people can be held accountable. And how is it that the Governor-General could swear in Scott Morrison into ministerial portfolios without there being a transparency there about that process? This is quite extraordinary. Australians need a Prime Minister who's focused on the job that they're given. Nothing about the last government was real, not even the government itself.
Prime Minister, we've learned that having sworn himself in as Resources Minister, Scott Morrison used that power to cancel a gas exploration project about 50 k's off the New South Wales coast. Would you have supported that PEP11 project if had you been Prime Minister at the time?
Well, I wasn't Prime Minister at the time. That's the point. The Prime Minister at the time was also the Minister for Resources at the time, and we know that if you are the Minister for the Environment or the Minister for Immigration or the Minister for Resources, a range of portfolios have within the legislation that's provided a responsibility for the Minister to make a decision separate from the Prime Minister or from Cabinet processes, bearing in mind all of the information that is available to that Minister. Now, the fact that Minister Pitt disagreed with the decision that was made by the Prime Minister as the Minister for Resources as well as Minister Pitt is quite extraordinary. I don't think it's clear whether Minister Pitt was aware that his role had been usurped. I think PEP11 raised, I was on the record raising my concerns about the project, as was a range of people in the Labor Party about that. We asked questions in the Parliament about the PEP11 project to the Minister for Resources. There was an obligation upon the Prime Minister at that point in time, if not beforehand, to actually reveal what the arrangements were. This isn't some, local footy club. This is the government of Australia, where the people of Australia were kept in the dark as to what the ministerial arrangements were. It's completely unacceptable. There's an absolute need for clear transparency to come through here. And it's not as if the journalists who've written about some of this weren't in close contact with the government from time to time about issues that were raised by the former government. But it's clear that the Australian people deserve explanations. This is very contrary to our Westminster system. It is unbecoming, it was cynical, and it was just weird that this has occurred. And Australians will be scratching their head today knowing that the government that they thought was there wasn't actually the Australian government at all.
So have you asked the Solicitor General to look at this?
We will be asking all of. I've asked the Secretary of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. He'll be seeking advice from appropriate people, including the Solicitor General, about all of these issues. I'll be getting a full briefing this afternoon. We've had revelations last night on news.com.au, and then further revelations this morning. This is dripping out like a tap that needs a washer fixed. And what we need is actually to get the full flow of all the information out there, and then we'll make a decision about a way forward here. But these circumstances should never have arisen. We do have a non-presidential system of government in this country, but what we had from Scott Morrison is a centralisation of power, is the overriding of ministerial decisions, and all done in secret. All done in secret. And we know this comes on top of what we saw on May 21st on election day, whereby the Prime Minister and the Minister responsible overrode the advice to put out information about the arrival of a boat here in Australia in order to cynically pursue political objectives in direct contradiction to what had been the government's policy. We had that investigated by the Department of Home Affairs and that damning report released. But this goes to the way that the government was operating over what period of time is unclear, but what is clear is that there are real consequences for it. Perhaps this explains why we didn't order enough vaccines. I mean, the Minister for Health might have thought the Prime Minister was ordering them because he was also the Minister for Health and he thought the Minister for Health was ordering them. What we know is that this is a shambles and it needs clearing up, and the Australian people deserve better than this contempt for democratic processes and for our Westminster system of government, which is what we've seen trashed by the Morrison government.
Prime Minister, do you have any preliminary advice from the Solicitor General as to whether any laws have been broken? I guess what are the consequences here?
No, I don't, and I'll await for the advice because my government will operate in an orderly and transparent way, not like the former government. Australians deserve better than what we've seen revealed over the past few days.
What consequences would be?
I'm not preempting any of that advice. I'll accept that advice, and we will operate in a transparent way. And I'm sure tomorrow in Canberra I will have more to say about that.
Does the Governor General have any questions to answer here about why he's done what he's done and why he didn't tell anyone?
I'll have more to say about that when we receive advice. But let's be clear here. This was a centralisation of power by the former Prime Minister, and the former Prime Minister should be held accountable for his actions, as well as the actions of other members of his government. This was a political decision, or a series of political decisions were made. It's not clear to me, or indeed to anyone at this point in time, how many other portfolios Scott Morrison was sworn into. But what's very clear is that this was a sign of no confidence by Scott Morrison in the Morrison government, because he didn't allow ministers to do their job.
Are you disappointed that Timothy Weeks has returned to Afghanistan to support the Taliban?
Well, the Australian government advice remains that people should not return to Afghanistan, people should not visit Afghanistan, and it's very clear that the human rights of women as well as others in Afghanistan have deteriorated since the return of the Taliban.
Prime Minister, a survey of aged care staff out today shows that nearly 60% of frontline workers believe the plan to mandate 215 minutes of personalised care per resident by 2024 is impossible to achieve. The survey, I think, polled 1,100 workers between May 27 and June 12. Is it likely that you may have to recalibrate your targets for the aged care sector given workforce shortages?
These aren't my targets, these are the recommendations of the Royal Commission. And the Aged Care Royal Commission indicated what was necessary. It's not surprising at all that aged care workers who are under enormous pressure and have been so for a long period of time are concerned. We know that that was documented, well documented by the Royal Commission.
Excuse me, how many more aged care staff do you expect to have in the system by the end of this year, Prime Minister, and where do you think you'll find them from?
Look, we'll continue to work on those issues. The first thing for us to do is to stop people leaving the sector, and a government that is concerned to actually lift up aged care and to lift up the care that's given to our older Australians to allow them to live with the dignity and respect that they deserve is a first step, because we know that people were leaving the industry. We also know that part of what can occur is the structure of the industry. A range of workers were working part-time, and the advice there is that if you move to a better system, then that will help to alleviate the shortages which are there. In addition to that, we've indicated training will be important, and in addition to that, of course, for a long period of time, the health sector have seen people come to this country to make a contribution as well. I don't know if Mark wants to add anything there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Well, just how soon is the
So we're hoping to break ground by the end of this year, so in a couple of months, and the plan is that the facility will become operational by the end of 2024. Minimum 100 million doses per annum. If the need arises, the facility will be able to produce that many doses.
And I know we've heard it out there, but it's not just, we just think of it in terms of COVID, like the population, it goes with this.
Correct. So the facility is a respiratory mRNA facility. It'll have the capacity, as I said, for 100 million doses, COVID-19, flu, respiratory syncytial virus or RSV, and the combinations of those products. So we're currently in a phase 1 study already for a COVID-flu combination vaccine.
Can you walk us through the facility? Is it going to be a modification to an existing building or a brand new building?
That's a completely brand new greenfield site right here in the biomedical precinct of Monash.
Moderna's obviously a global company. You could have set this up anywhere. What was it about Victoria and Melbourne and Monash that persuaded you that this was not only feasible but the place to do it?
The science. As we looked at different sites, the science that's here, the capabilities in Clayton and Melbourne are world class. I mean, Moderna being a renowned mRNA science discovery company, we wanted to make sure our facility was going to be grounded and built in an ecosystem that can support us and support our development moving forward.
Thanks so much, Michael. Yes, that was on the bus. This is an incredibly proud and an incredibly exciting day for Victoria. Our science and health tech community is absolutely and undeniably world class, and Moderna has recognised that, and as Michael just told you, that was a big factor in their thinking. As the Premier said earlier when he addressed our event just before, what is very exciting about today is that pandemic scale mRNA vaccine capability, but perhaps even more exciting are the things that will be discovered by the research partnerships that we are entering into with Moderna. Now, this building's going to take a couple of years to put together. The science and research partnerships have started already and will just continue to go from strength to strength.
Might I ask you something else? The protest that we saw outside of the Royal Children's Hospital yesterday, there were anti-vaxxers who were protesting. Obviously, horrible for parents and children. Is there anything the government can do to ensure that that doesn't happen again?
Look, the right to peaceful protest is an important right. I spent a month of my life living on a couch at the Children's Hospital, and I think these people should have a good, hard think about what they're doing to people going through incredibly challenging personal circumstances. I'd urge them to find better, more thoughtful and frankly more effective ways to protest, because I think all they've done is turn the other 99.9% of the community to a view that these people are completely out of step with the rest of us.
Dr. Stephen Parnas is calling for exclusion zones. Do you think that's something we need to do?
Look, this is a one-off, I think. the government supported legislation for exclusion zones around abortion clinics some years ago because there was a really clear need to do so. I think that we would take advice on something like that from security authorities, Victoria Police and the like, but hopefully these people will have a good hard look at themselves and take their protest somewhere else, leave these people and their families and their very sick children alone.
If it becomes a pattern of behaviour though, would the government actually consider doing something like that?
Oh, look, I'm not briefed on that, and that's sort of well outside of my portfolio, I must say. My every waking thought for a while in preparation for today has been around our announcement for Moderna. Perhaps you could go to the Health Minister's folks for a comment on that. But I would urge the protesters to find in themselves some skerrick of human decency and spare a thought for what it might feel like for them should they be living on a couch at the Children's Hospital and for their children to ever be in a position where they're admitted to a facility like that. Think about what that might feel like if the shoe were on the other foot.
Joe, I was hoping to ask the Premier this, but and I do acknowledge it's not your portfolio, but Ben Carroll this morning admitted that Mikey isn't anywhere near up to snuff. If we end up scrapping that, are you thinking about buying tech from interstate or overseas so that people can just scan their credit card or their iPhone?
Look, again, for sort of further detail on that, I'd encourage you to take that up with Minister Carroll. But the Mikey arrangements are contracts that are entered into for some years at a time, from time to time, and I think government in the renewal of any contractual arrangements would always be keen to see evolution in technology and a better experience for passengers.
How do you think Mikey works? Do you have a personal view on it?
Well, I tap and it works. So, I know in other jurisdictions in the world, there are sort of a more seamless integration. But yeah, I think that would be something that Minister Carroll and the Department of Transport can continue to discuss with the people, with the Mikey folks who hold those current arrangements and do an important job in making sure that people are able to pay their fares in a seamless way and get about and do their business. Okay, great. All right, cheers. Thanks, everyone.